That's a good sign. Once again, just tons of material for your safekeeping at home. Deacon John was mentioning too, all of this is on our diaconal website. You can find this information. And again, thought helpful to be able to simply have it printed out, because as you go through, if you're looking at it on the site, then you go from page to page, and unless you're electronically bouncing back to where you're doing your notes, it gets a little bit difficult. Again, if you throw those things either in your binder or whatever that you have, as you're reading through or you see something that's like, wow, I'm not familiar with that, you can make a note and know where to go back to. So the primary titles on here, order of service, that's what we're going to do next. Overview of the marriage resources. Again, those are all broken down on our website, diocesan website also. So it's another place for your resource. And as Matthew was saying too, sometimes it's good just to have that electronic backup to be able to check through. This is probably one of the most helpful of everything that you have. Instead of the gazillion pages, the purple order of service. And this really just puts it side by side. And again, if you go to your right book, Chapter 1 is the order of celebrating matrimony within Mass. Chapter 2 is order of celebrating matrimony without Mass. And then you'll see underneath in italics, without Holy Communion. On the back side, same thing in Chapter 2, you would have celebrating matrimony without Mass with Holy Communion. And then finally in Chapter 3, celebrating between a Catholic and a catechumen or a non-Christian, which is the form basically that I used with the Hindu service that we had. So, again, the main ones that you're going to be probably involved with intimately, excuse me, are going to really be on that page 1 and 2. You'll be assisting oftentimes at Mass, maybe at a wedding, with the pastor and so forth, and you'll have your regular diaconal responsibilities. And the question came up was that if there was a special occasion to where it was your daughter or son being married, or a niece or a nephew being married, and they wanted to have the celebration within Mass, but could you as deacon be the primary church witnesses for the ones doing the vows? Now, again, the rite envisions the presider doing that. However, it's up to the presider. The presider can delegate you to in fact do that you could share and do the witnessing of the vows, the exchange of rings, and so forth. So it doesn't have to be the presider, although that's the way the church kind of sees it.
This is a sort of a pertinent question just because we have a 25-year-old daughter who's not engaged but could be. Is that presider then, as you were saying, you don't want to wake up the day before and realize you haven't done the right thing. So is it the presider who at the Mass who makes that decision, or is it all the way back to the bishop who makes that? Is it just that is a celebrant at the Mass?
No, I'd say the pastor of the Mass and so forth. And again, as you're doing the prep work and you sit down and have the conversation, this is one that's on our calendar down the road here.
Yeah.
This is my niece, and I would like to be able to maybe preach the homily and do the exchange of vows with them. I think the vast majority would say fine.
Sure.
But I can also say there may be one that, according to the way that the church envisions it and sees it, that it's like, well, really the presider sits at Mass, that's really what I should be doing. So it's a pastoral call by the pastor. So it's not written in stone that they have to, but again, most of the time, pastors, give that leeway to celebrate the way that they want to have things celebrated. Okay. So when you look at that from side to side, just coming down introductory rites, pretty much the same thing when you're beginning Mass. There's that entrance procession. Well, we ended off with the entrance procession. That's the first form of the entrance procession, as I described it earlier, with everybody coming down the main aisle just like you would at the beginning of Mass. The other would be that, in fact, the minister and probably the groomsmen would come in from the side, take their positions, usually because for the nuptial blessing, we have the kneeler there, so that would be something in front of the altar. So the officiant might come, if this was the kneeler, just standing, and then once the groomsmen are all here, the groom is over here, then they can have the bridal party begin coming down the main aisle. And then once they take their positions, bridesmaids in the front, the bride comes down. That's another thing, typically, that everyone is seated during the initial procession when it's done kind of the version that we used to do. And then when the bride came down, the minister would say, "May I invite the congregation to please rise." And then that's when everybody stands when that entrance. On this, normally, when the minister and the groomsmen would come in and so forth, since that's the beginning of the entrance, normally they would have people stand at that point. Now again, some of those begin to become pastoral calls, because then it's like, we don't allow certain photography, it has to be in a certain area in certain parishes. And it's like, well, if everyone's standing, then we can't get the pictures and so forth. So those are the details that you sit with with couples that's beyond all of this. But again, with your pastor, usually you design what works best. And so as you go through this, see how the pastor is doing one of their typical weddings. There's no problem, just sit, wedding crasher, just don't wear your collar, just don't, don't let them know who you are. But anyway, no, come and sit at one of the weddings that's going on at the parish, and just see how it all plays out. That'll give you a good feel. So those are the two primary ways of coming into the church and setting up for the beginning of the service. Then again, sign of the cross, the greeting. Normally when the couple first comes, you'll have a little exchange of words with them. Usually a welcome to all of the people on behalf of Dick and Jane. We're just blessed to have you all here to celebrate with us today, whatever you're saying. So there's usually just a brief introduction, and then after that you might begin, and so we begin in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Sign of the cross. Then there's a greeting in the right book. Maybe we ought to just turn to that. Let's go to chapter 2. So page 41. And again, typically, you can wear alb, cincture, stole, and or dalmatic. Usually we only wear the dalmatic, usually when Mass is going on, but in our parish, deacons will wear the dalmatic when you're the main celebrant for a wedding for matrimony. So, again, the rubrics in red, it'll kind of map out for you right in the beginning of the chapter is to typically what you wear. So they arrive at their place, and so then the beginning, and let me just say is, we're kind of maybe read through, and I know that you all are going to actually go through the rite this afternoon, I understand, and kind of the mock wedding. As you pray the prayers, remember praying the prayers out of any of the missals, out of the right text and so forth, is not just reading the words on the page. And that's part of your preparation in, number one, just getting familiar with where you are in the book and what you're going to be doing on that given day. And to not only practice reading the word, sometimes, as we know, the translation just for daily Mass, with certain prayers it can be a little bit awkward if you just open it up and you're going to read it the first time. It's good to prepare and see that ahead of time. But if you, the more comfortable you are with the text, you're better able to pray the words of the text. So that again, in your slow, deliberate way, Frankie did a great job this morning just in leading us in morning prayer. Sometimes I'm like, okay, morning prayer, let's get this done in 10 minutes. And and you just kind of roll through it. Very different tone when it's set for you by who's ever leading, and you as officiant at a wedding will kind of lead the whole tone of what's going on. So, prayerfully, pray. So when you say, grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ, be able to look at the couple and the community rather than, just in the book. At least, a phrase that'll be used, or as with the beginning of a communion service or with mass, the greeting, if you're using one of those. Feel free and feel, again, in that spirit and in the moment of what you're doing, and that they would respond with your spirit. The first part of this beginning, and again, we are at the greeting part here. We've come rejoicing into the house of the Lord for this celebration. So this is the part that basically you are announcing to the people that are gathered here that we are now standing with Dick and Jane and all of what the prayer says. When that concludes, either that one or number 88 would be the first part of that beginning greeting. Then with hands extended. Now, most of the time as a deacon, we don't have altar servers. It can be something that for weddings, you might want to try and work with the minister that lines up altar servers for mass and so forth, to say it would be helpful to have a server, possibly, if at all possible, or someone within the family on the Catholic side, if they have someone that is a server ahead of time. You can't, it's like 5 minutes before we're ready to go, the bridesmaids are all doing their thing, and it's like, man, I wish I had someone to hold a book for me. It's like, can you come up over here? And it's like, everything needs to be orchestrated in your head and heart ahead of time.
Can you enlist a book boy from the audience, or?
Typically not. I would say if you did not have someone, again, if they were serving as a minister of the service in a ministerial capacity, you would want to have them in an alb, have them in what they would be wearing also, rather than just a warm body, to say, I just, because if that's the case, you have a book stand.
Right.
You can place it down and do that. So, so really in saying, they envision with hands extended to pray the final part of the prayer. Be attentive to our prayers, O Lord, and so forth, with your hands extended. However, you may be able to do it like what I'm doing here. If the couple's in front of you, you're praying the prayer and looking at them, and you have a hand extended. So, the idea is, this is a concluding prayer. The first part's a greeting. So the greeting is announced. The prayer is again prayed in its own way, and typically with that hands extended in that prayer. So that would conclude the very beginning part. So we went down, procession, sign of the cross, greeting, addressed to the couples. That's the first part that we were doing. Then on the Mass, the next part would actually be the Gloria. There is no penitential rite in a wedding that's occurring with the full Mass. So no penitential. You would go right from this prior to the liturgy of the word, and they would sing the Gloria. So that would be next.
Between the prayer that you just went over and the liturgy of the word, in the ritual it has several suggestions for what it just says, other prayers.
Mm-hmm.
Simple question, is that other prayers that can be, they're collects, that can be offered in addition to this introductory prayer or in place of the introductory prayer?
Let's just turn to the first one, 188. If you see where he is, he's on page 43. At the bottom where it says amen, after with hands extended, he says this prayer, and then it has other prayers. So go back to number 188.
It's on page 91.
The page numbers don't make a difference. A lot of them. If you go to the paragraph.
Yeah, there you go. On page 117, additional collects. Okay, this collect may not be used in the same celebration as the first nuptial blessing. So again, you'd have to read through and see which nuptial blessing is being used and so forth. So that one would not be used, because oftentimes some of the words will be very similar. So it will direct you to that. So you could go to 189, so the concluding part of that prayer, not the entire greeting. After the greeting, when it moves to that collect or it moves to the prayer, you could do 89 or 188, 189, 191, 192, 193.
Gotcha.
So ahead of time, if you want to, kind of read through some of those and it kind of moves you, it's like, I really, that feels like a good prayer. They're all good, but if that one kind of resonates with you, feel free. And it's good to do options. the people out there are gonna hear this once and probably not even remember that part. But for you that may be doing a lot, it helps you to be in the spirit to kind of bounce around and use different prayers. You know,
Deacon, my quick, I just hadn't left my mind, because when we talked about if there's not a server, depending on where you're standing in the first, you know, when you walk in and you make a greeting and the initial prayer, if you don't have a book stand there, are you holding the book with one hand?
the only thing I have is the right book.
Are you holding it with two hands or one hand and just?
Usually I will hold it with one hand, because sometimes I'll gesture, or either that, or I'll kind of hold them both just underneath if I'm, you know, reading something from there.
And if you have a server?
And if I had a server, I would probably hold the book to that point, because until it says, and with hands extended,
Okay.
you don't need to be
Okay.
greeting like this. The prayer is with your hands
Okay.
extended. And so then you could pass off. And again, part of the server training at the rehearsal would be, if you will come up, when I begin this prayer, if you'll just come stand beside me. And then when it's time, you could hand that and then conclude the prayer. And like I said, you know, a lot of these things get worked out as you simply do them. And the benefit of seeing weddings at your own particular parish is tremendously helpful. And sitting with the office assistants, administrators that do a lot of the paperwork and the gathering up, just, you know, ask them about the file that they use and you know, what would my responsibility be? What parts do you do? Do I have to trace down? Someone asked about the baptismal certificate. Am I somehow supposed to, you know, do this? And they will, you know, they're familiar. They will be more than happy and pleased to help you. But some parishes are small and don't have secretaries, administrative assistants, and you're it. So it's good, you know, ultimately to know how to do it on your own, although it doesn't all fall to you. You know, usually you're going to have a lot of help in a lot of different ways. So don't let that frighten you off. Okay, we went down. They would sing the Gloria, and then afterwards, then collect, as that's in the Mass part. And then it moves to Liturgy of the Word. Typically, that's going to be as a Sunday liturgy. First reading, responsorial psalm. Second reading, gospel acclamation, gospel. Okay, so that's going to be present in the just whether it's within Mass or without Mass. So that's going to be identical. You all are going to practice, I guess at that point, your reading of, I guess, of a gospel. Is that what was planned, Ed? They're going to have a gospel reading that they picked out, and then they will have a wedding homily associated with that. Great. Okay. So that's where all of that will happen. When that concludes, then the next part is going to be the actual celebration of matrimony. So we're now up on page 44. Again, depending on the church and your particular custom, usually you have places where everyone's going to be seated. You know, in Protestant weddings, they usually stand for the whole thing because it's just a word, kind of a brief word service, exchange of vows, exchange of rings, and they're finished. So their processions come in, they get in place, everyone does their work, and they process back out. Because our services are going to be extended, probably, you know, one outside of Mass would be 40, 45 minutes, roughly. Within Mass, probably 60 to 65 minutes, depending on processions, and if you want to start seating, you know, grandparents, parents, all of that. You know, if the wedding is at 11 in the morning, you know, do they start the seating at 11, or is the wedding starting at 11? So, you know, those are all things that you just see how your parish does it. But anyway, you know, part of it in your thinking is when everyone goes and has their seats, then again, when it's time for the exchange of vows and rings, which we're getting into here, the couple will come back into front of the kneeler and so forth, and usually you will invite the maid of honor and the best man, their primary witnesses, to come and stand, not necessarily right with them, but just off to the side, because the bride will oftentimes dish off her flowers to the maid of honor so that she can hold hands and exchange rings. So it's good to have at least those two people in place. So at this point, as you invite, maybe at the end of the homily, something along the line, so if you are in fact prepared to celebrate the sacrament of matrimony, I invite you to the place now, meet me in front of God's altar, and we will have the exchange of vows and the exchange of rings. So you can, again, you can kind of direct the congregation and direct the folks just like that. So it's not just thinking, well, everybody just needs to know where they're going. You can, when it's time for the liturgy of the word, when you conclude, you can invite the congregation. I invite you now to please be seated for our first reading. Well, that's the clue. So if someone at rehearsal is like, oh, no, I'm up, so they know when to go. So, there's ways of kind of moving the service, but you as celebrant are going to be the one that kind of directs. Otherwise, people are sitting in the pews and they're all kind of looking at you as like, well, is this the time I move or don't move or speak or don't speak? So if you have something like those little taglines to throw in, it's just helpful for the movement. It looks very, thoughtful as to how to get people where they need to be. So if we get the couple up in front of us and we get the two main witnesses, again, it has the first dearly beloved, which you would say to them and to everybody. And then the questions of consent will come next. And usually at the rehearsal, I typically, again, don't pray anything in its fullness. Even if I have readers that are practicing, I'll back up right there too. So, for the liturgy of the word, if you have copies of the reading, all of the readings that are happening, first reading, responsorial, second, acclamation, whatever ones you are using, print them out so that at the rehearsal, if the wedding party has the people that are going to be lectored for that, you can give them a copy so that they can get familiar with. And then oftentimes, if we're at the church where the wedding is happening, as we're practicing the movement and everything else, I'll invite them to the ambo or to the lectern, wherever they're going to be, depending on how the church is set up, with the microphone on so they can hear themselves. And just say, if you will just read the first two lines. And so, you're not practicing the whole thing over and over and over again. So it's kind of fresh and new for everyone that's there on the actual day of the wedding. But it is good to let them experience, because all the time, they'll speak, and if it's a big church, it's this little tiny microphone, and they say the first word, you'll see them, they'll jump. It's like, did that come out of me? It's like, well, yeah, that's, so it just hearing themselves helps. Anytime you can, again, put them at ease, it's just a little bit better for everybody all the way around. So if you prepare your own binder for the celebration itself, you can have those things in there, the intercessions, the prayers and so forth. And then, tell them, I've given you a copy of, this is exactly what you will be reading tomorrow. However, you don't need to bring the paper up with you. It'll be up here on the ambo. Okay, and then I show them the book that it's going to be in. I already have it out there, so I have all the readings, and show them if reader number one forgets to turn the page, don't get all upset. It'll, just if you go to the next page, that's yours. Because they get up there and it's like, it's not my reading, and it's like, well, the person